You're all very welcome. My name is Owen Gill, and I'm with a group called CalMast in Waterford Institute of Technology. And we are working together with our colleagues in Institute Technology Carlow to present the Southeast Engineering Festival. And we are doing so with the support of the Southeast region of Engineers Ireland and the Engineering the Southeast Industry Cluster. Carlow Institute of Technology and Waterford Institute of Technology are working together to create a new technological university for the Southeast region. And so this is the first of a lot of future cooperation between us in presenting and promoting STEM across the region, and indeed further afield, because I see that a lot of people from around the country and indeed people from other countries are joining us. And that is the wonder of the technology we're using. And while we do bemoan the fact that we can't meet up in person, and we look forward to doing that again, at least we can reach so many people around the world, which is great. So tonight we have, although it's only this evening for us, it's probably tonight for Niamh, but we have a really interesting presentation for you. And this is Dr. Niamh Shaw on your screen, well known to so many now because of all her media appearances. And we're delighted that she can make time for us and talk to the ordinary people. Niamh is, I know Niamh for a long time. It's probably more than 10 years ago when we were in college together.
It was five.
Yeah, and since then Niamh has had a very interesting trajectory. She has been an engineer, a scientist, an actor, comedian, a writer, but most of all, we know her now as a space communicator. And so I'm delighted that she can come here to bring us all to Mars in the company of some extraordinary people. We have Mary Bourke from Trinity College, Kevin Nolan from Technological University Dublin, and John O Donoghue from Enbio Space Company. So I'll hand you over to Niamh, and we'll get ready for our trip to Mars.
Thanks a million, Owen. Look at how I decorated my room for you. Isn't that brilliant? Red in honor of the red planet, because this month is Mars month. Not only are we going to be talking about the Mars Perseverance mission, but of course there were two other missions that successfully arrived at Mars this month. The United Arab Emirates, first mission ever to Mars, orbiting Mars, their HOPE mission, and then a Chinese mission, Taiwan 1, that arrived at Mars and will eventually be dropping off its rover in the months ahead. But let's not worry about that. Let's focus on Perseverance and putting it in context tonight. And we have a mighty lineup of people with a variety of contexts around that and perspectives. And so we'll get a great viewpoint from the engineer's point of view, from the science point of view, and then also putting it in context, because of course it's Engineers Week. So just to give you a little bit more detail about our three speakers, but Owen very capably gave them all an introduction. But Kevin Nolan is a scientist and a composer, and he's also the author of the popular science book Mars, A Cosmic Stepping Stone from Springer, which was published first in 2008. And Kevin is also a representative for the Planetary Society in Ireland, so he has a vast knowledge of Mars in terms of all the missions so far and from start to finish. And then we have Professor Mary Bourke, and she's Associate Professor of Geography at Trinity College, but her research in Mars has been funded by NASA, ESA, and the Geological Survey of Ireland. She's a planetary geomorphologist. and she has expertise in extreme environments on Earth and on Mars. And she's published on landscapes about Antarctica, Australia, Namibia, Mars, and Ireland. Of course, she spent some time in the United States working at the Smithsonian Institution and the Planetary Science Institute in Arizona, working for many years with NASA-funded projects. So she'll be giving us the scientific perspective. And then to give us an engineering perspective, we felt it was interesting to get somebody from the industry side of things who were involved in the design and implementation, the planning end of how to construct spacecraft. And no better person than John O Donoghue, who's CEO of Enbio Ireland and is revolutionising Ireland's participation in ESA projects, as well as some future projects from other space agencies. They create CoBlast, which is this patented product that is superior in heat shield technology for the spacecraft. And he'll be telling us a little bit about his most recent collaboration with the European Space Station on the ESA Solar Orbiter. So without further ado, let's get cracking, because I'm conscious of time. We're going to, I'll be basically kind of hearing from Kevin and Mary and John in their expertise, kind of fielding questions, and then I'll open it up into broader questions about Mars, and then we'll have a session for question and answers where you can ask your questions, and that's the most important part of the night. So it seems appropriate, I think, to go back to Kevin first. And Kevin, given that, you know, you have been studying Mars for many years and chronicling it in your book, can you give us a little overview of the Perseverance mission for people who haven't been aware of what's been going on in the last 10 days or so?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great place to start, Niamh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Share my screen now, and we got a few slides set up for that. So let me just kind of kick this off. So as you know, unless you've been missing the news completely, you know, we've had the Mars Perseverance rover land in the last week or so, and that's been wonderful. Actually, I just should start off and saying that this is the Hope first mission, UAE Hope.
Sit in the armchair.
So maybe if everybody else could mute their microphones, it'd be great, actually. So the thing is, that's a beautiful image from Hope, but Perseverance is the latest in a 25-year exploration program of Mars. We'll talk a little bit more about previous missions a little bit later on. So it's not coming out of the blue, and it's a mission that was set up basically to do very sophisticated and targeted science. Now, I promise this is the only slide with, if I can actually move it forward, with writing on it. Let's skip the slide. No, I didn't. No, actually, there we go. So basically a graphic showing the rover is a 1-ton rover. It's about 2 meters high, has a very sophisticated arm with an extraordinary set of instruments on it to analyze the chemical and potential biological aspect of Mars soil. It has a spectrometer, which is a 1 million watt laser that can vaporize rock and then analyze it. It has 43 canisters to take samples, put them on the ground, and we'll talk about collecting those in a few minutes. And of course, as we'll see from a bit of footage from Niamh in a few minutes, it was landed using this sophisticated device called a sky crane, which lowered it down via tethers onto the actual Martian surface. I'm having difficulty moving these forward. Here we go. So I'll just talk about this. So it's got 3 parts to it: to search for possible ancient biology. It's to develop new technologies on Mars, including it's got an artificial intelligence operating system and a new capability called relative terrain navigation, which will be used for robots to assist humans on the moon in the next 6 to 7 years, and eventually when we send people to Mars. It's then got the ability to collect canisters, and ESA have signed the contracts. This is happening in 2026 to 2031. We'll go to Mars to collect those samples, bring them back to Earth. And then it's in preparation for humans to Mars it's got instruments on board to create oxygen from the atmosphere, to test the strength of soil. And in fact, the Spanish have developed a weather monitoring system to monitor weather in an unprecedented way for, as I say, future humans there on the surface. Now, there's the demo kind of the laser blasting at rock and then analyzing its surface. It's also got then a little artificial intelligence helicopter on board, which will fly ahead of it, scan the area, transmit the information back to the rover, and they'll plot ahead. So very, very innovative from an engineering standpoint. It's landing in Jezero crater, which Mary will say more of later on. Beautiful symmetry, the first object ever viewed on Mars was by Christian Huygens in 1656, Syrtis Major, and we've landed right there in a very interesting part of Mars. And all the while, when you're thinking about Perseverance, ask yourself the question, we won't be able to answer fully tonight, is why did we land there? How did we know to land there is the big question. How come we knew? And from orbit, and Mary will talk more about this, we saw using false color infrared images that there are extraordinarily interesting parts of this crater. First of all, a river delta, ancient clay materials, and every color is a different mineral, and they're all interesting in association with past potential for the origin of life there. So we're going to land, well, we've landed the rover. I was going to say we're going to land it. In fact, that was the landing hope spot. We landed somewhere around here, 2 kilometers away. And over the next 2 years, it's going to drive up through this delta and out of the actual crater and lay like a breadcrumb trail of 43 canisters of sealed materials, which Europe will send a lander to collect in 2028. And so here's the actual, this is the pre-landing, and Niamh's going to show a video in a minute. That's from orbit. Here's the image of it coming into land, imaged by a Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. There's its parachute. And in fact, well, this is where it landed, just about here. So 2 kilometers. Now, only 8 years ago, we could only land a rover within an accuracy of 100 kilometers on the surface. Maybe 20 kilometers by Atomic Curiosity, but we were landing within an accuracy of 1 kilometer or 2 by now. Extraordinary advancement. This is actual footage of the rover being landed onto the surface, and then it looking back up at the sky crane as it cut the tether and flying off. Live, these are transmitted virtually within minutes of the mission happening. And as you may have become aware, NASA, in their cleverness, JPL put actually a code on the actual parachute, and within 2 hours, a computer scientist in Paris had cracked the code. It's things mighty dare. It's a line of poetry, and then the actual coordinates of the mission sitting on the outer part of the actual parachute. So there's where we hoped to land it. There's where we did land it. Extraordinary accuracy, and there is the actual river delta claim delta fan. Just to show you one or two, we're nearly there, Niamh. A beautiful image on board of the lineage of previous rovers: Pathfinder, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, and Perseverance. And if you didn't sign up, you missed out. 11 million names are etched onto a piece of silicon on the surface. Mine and Niamh's are there.
Yeah.
And watch out for the next Mars missions. Plenty more to come. You can put your name or your family's names on the rover, and it'll land on Mars. It's a lovely idea. So here's then some preliminary images from the surface just in the last few days. And just today, this panoramic image, there's the outer rim of the Jezero crater that Mary will mention more on. Whoops, sorry, I'll just go back to that. Just basically put up by NASA in the last day or so. And then just to finish off for this, and Niamh will show a video. So this is a graphic which you can download showing the actual launch of Perseverance. Then in 2026, and NASA and Europe will land another lander. A rover will go collect all those canisters, then bring them back up with the orbit, and then ESA will collect them in Mars orbit and bring them back to Earth on a massive 6-ton, 40-meter wide spacecraft called the Earth Return Orbiter. And the contracts for all this were signed last October. So sample return is happening. So very, very exciting times ahead. And that's kind of what I want to say for Perseverance now. I'll hand the screen back to Niamh, and maybe you can run the video. We can talk about through that.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I'll see if I can share. I can. This is great. This is great. This is Ben's now. He's giving us co-hosting opportunities. So now let me play the video. So I've taken the last minute of the video. So this is the final approach, but it shows what Kevin just said, which is, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen shortly, it'll split into 3 parts. The bottom part is the view of the camera of the rover, of the crane looking down on the rover. And then the upper one is the view of the rover looking up at the crane. And you'll see them breaking apart and then flying, the crane then flying away. So let's just do it here. It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing engineering that they thought that they could get this accurate.
Yeah, to be able to transmit this back live as
I know
this is traveling at 12,000 miles an hour, but it's about 16,000 kilometers an hour, and coming into land, and has to land at 1 kilometer per hour onto the surface, all within 7 minutes. It's called the 7 minutes of terror. So this is now actually near to the surface. We'll see the sand blowing away as it comes down towards the land. There you go. There's from the 8 rockets of the actual retro rocket blowing the dust, and just about to set the rover down. So there we go then. There's the rover coming down, and the sky crane above it that's blowing all that dust. And this is the second time they've done this. Curiosity was landed the same way in 2012.
Yeah.
They couldn't film it.
Yeah.
It's been just gently placed down. Then the feathers are cut, and then the sky crane flies away. And unfortunately, it crash lands about 1 kilometer away. There's nothing more they can do. And there's obviously a jubilant jet propulsion laboratory. To put this in context, you probably could have somewhere hundreds of people who've dedicated 10 years of their lives to this, and will spend the next 10 years of their lives at this.
Yeah.
So had it not landed properly, potentially somewhere in the region of several hundred science and engineering careers just terminated on this project. But thankfully that didn't happen, you know. So we'll get to now witness this amazing mission over the next 2 years. And all you have to do is Google Mars Perseverance and you will get the latest images. The camera on board is a 4K video camera. So they're going to be sending spectacular images back from Mars.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. And there's I think there's 23 cameras in total, isn't there? 19 on the actual rover itself. Thanks, Kevin. We'll come back to you in a while. We'll talk about Mars in bigger context. There's already a question about there are other rovers on Mars. No better man to answer that for us. But let's go. Let's shift it up a little bit, John. When I see the video of the people and all the applause and everything, it's always very moving because we understand the effort required and the amount of people behind that. And as somebody who's involved from the engineering end of things, okay, you weren't involved in Perseverance, but you were involved in a pretty important mission that launched last year for the European Space Agency heading to the sun. And can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in that? And I have a video. You just tell me when you want me to line it up.
Sure. Thanks very much, Niamh. Yeah. We started a business in 2006 to coat metals for the orthopedic sector, to put synthetic bone onto metal implants, for dental applications, anything going into the skeleton. And the European Space Agency heard about us and asked us, could we work on a coating to put on titanium so that we could protect the solar orbiter going to the sun. They started talking to us, I think, around this time 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. We started to put some ideas past them about a year later. And in 2012, we heard that we were going to be selected to coat the heat shield of the solar orbiter, which protects the whole mission from the very, very dangerous radiation and high temperature that comes from the sun when you're 2/3 of the way there from Earth. So all of a sudden we went from being nobodies to being significant in the space arena. And through that work, then they asked us to develop another coating. So the first one we developed was solar black, which is a black material on the heat shield of the solar orbiter. And then we were asked to develop a solar white as well. So if you'd like to show the video, I'll just point out some of the parts on, that we contributed to on the mission. It was fairly extensive, our input. We were mission critical with the two coatings. In other words, the mission wouldn't have launched without our technology. So on the side here, you see the white radiator panels. They're all of the standoff radiators for each of the 10 scientific instruments on that craft. And if you continue on, Niamh, what's coming around here now is the heat shield. We coated all of that heat shield. It's about 3 meters square. What's on that is burnt animal bone. So in other words, very close to what we were doing for orthopedics in the human person. So from inner space to outer space. On the right-hand side, you see the solar arrays, or you can see the meter side of the craft here. We coated all of the frames holding those arrays. At the back, you can see the instrument boom sticking out. That we coated all of that with, it holds all some of the scientific instruments and the medium gain antenna. Underneath, you see the hanging down, you see the high gain antenna. The dish on that is about 1.3 meters across. We coated it in burnt animal bone. And all told, we coated more than 80% of that craft in Ireland.
Did it take long? Like, did they send you those parts then for you to coat?
we coated something like over the engineering model and the flight model, the actual craft itself, we coated something in the region of 360 parts. Not all of those are individual parts. The foils that would be on the front of the heat shield takes about 44 of those foils to make the heat shield. And we did 2 heat shields, the engineering model and the flight model. But over a period, I'd say from 2012 to 2017, so 5 years where we were actually producing parts. We started off doing the black parts. The finish was the white parts, the solar white parts. The black parts are using the fastest qualified technology in the history of the European Space Agency. And I suppose the other point of note is that the heat shield at various points is the closest man-made object to the sun in its orbit. Yeah.
It's incredible. And it's animal bone. Isn't that mad? Like,
well, it's our bone. It could be human bone.
Yeah, human bone. Yeah. But
So,
isn't it incredible that that's one of the strongest and the most effective heat shields that as we get close to the sun. And so were your parts like very near the end of the process then? Like were they kind of going, right, everybody has to have their experiments because we have to send them to John to coat, or were they components within the system itself? If you know what I mean?
We only did components. The most, I suppose, nerve-wracking component of the lot was the high gain antenna, that dish that's 1.2 to 3 meters in diameter. It was, about the weight of a frying pan. So it was extremely fragile, and we did ding it. We actually put a small little dent in the one that's actually about 235 million kilometers away from Earth at the moment, and out there flying. So that's our little signature on it, our little point of note.
Yeah, it's like Ireland.
Yeah,
I'll come back to you. I'm going to talk about the bigger human, the human, that feeling of achievement when you actually see something that launch. I'll come back to you about that later on. That's great for now, John. It really gives us the engineering aspect of it. And then Mary, I'll come into you now as the scientist really who's probably, you can probably give us context about why the Jezero crater specifically, and why is that of interest? Because this is something that of our panel tonight, you're the one who's probably the most expert at kind of giving that context.
Sure, happy to do that. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining in. So lovely to see so many people interested.
Isn't it?
We are total nerds and we love this, but we don't know that it captures your imagination too. So I am somebody who teaches about Mars to geography students in Trinity College in Dublin. So study geography well and come to Trinity, and also they teach it in UCD. And so what I want to do is just answer really one of the questions that you've already asked, which is like, why? Why would you go and land in this particular place on Mars? Well, there's some really, really good reasons. And I'm going to move through that now. So you should be able to see my slides.
I can see them.
Happy days. Okay. So the first thing is to what I want to do is just show you an animation of Mars, and it's going from pole to pole, from the North Pole, from the North Pole to the South Pole. So here we are going we're looking at the southern hemisphere on Mars. Can you see my cursor move at all?
Yeah, I can.
That white blotch is the south pole of Mars, and it has an ice cap on it. There is water on Mars, and we've known about this for a very, very long time. Now we're swiveling up, and we're looking towards the north pole of Mars. And guess what's on the north pole of Mars? Yep, an ice cap.
Wow.
And this is a very interesting one. It's much larger, and it's composed of water, H2O, in its solid state. That is a water ice cap, all of that white stuff. If we move on to the next animation of Mars, this is what we call topography. It's the lie of the land. It's where the high bits and the low bits are on Mars. And so the reds and the whites are the highest plateaus and mountains, and the lowest bits are the dark blues. They're not heat, it's not water, it's just high and low on Mars. And you can see here, first of all, that the top is very, very smooth. Some people think there used to be an ocean there. If we look at this is the width of the United States of America. This is a huge canyon, like the Grand Canyon. It's caused by crustal forces that are pulling it apart, putting pressure. And these are volcanoes. The highest mountain in our solar system, this one here, which I saw a question about, Olympus Mons, the highest mountain in our solar system is on Mars, and it's an extinct volcano. So you can see that the top and the bottom of Mars are very different. One's quite smooth and one's got all these little stippled marks on it. And that is the typical signature of a body that has been punctuated. The surface has been punctuated by meteors hitting the surface. They are all impact craters. And that's the first indication of why we went to Jezero crater. It is one of these big impact craters. And you can see there's huge ones and there's also much, much smaller ones. And it's a process that's still going on today. So if humans went to Mars, one of the hazards they'd have to deal with would be incoming missiles from space that could puncture their habitat, could puncture their protective gear, could puncture their travel equipment. So just to show you where we are, we've landed in many, many different places, and I've been involved in some of these missions and I'm still involved in them. This is the one that's landed recently and where we are today. Now you'll notice that bar this one here, they're all kind of around the equator, and that's the engineers dictate to us that that's where they have to be. It's the safest place. A lot of the power is from solar power, solar panels, so we need to be able to see the sun because just like on Earth, on Mars in winter, it goes dark. They have the North Pole going dark on Mars. This is not something that I did in...
Looks like a smiley face.
This is an impact crater on Mars, and it's real. It has not been... I know. I'm looking here at John Hawkins' his reaction here. Hi, John. Absolutely, this is a real crater on Mars. Here's the outside of the crater, and all of these features here are caused by geography that goes on afterwards. The physical geography, ice melting, sediment moving, has all created these patterns. So this is caused by a meteor coming in and slamming into the surface of Mars billions of years ago. It's so long ago, it's actually very hard to think about it. So if we look here at this beautiful, what we call a perspective image of Jezero crater. We've been told that this is a feature of interest, and it's a feature of interest because it's a delta. And some of you might be thinking, well, what is a delta? So what happens is if you can visualize that you have a river, and the river carries water, and it carries stones, and it carries mud, and it flows downstream. And if it hits a really wide part of the stream, the water will slow down and it will deposit all of that material. Well, that's what happened here. You had a river that was flowing across the surface of Mars, and it met a very large hole in the ground, which happened to be an impact crater. And the water flowed into that and it filled it up like a lake, but it dropped all of the sediment right there at the mouth of the river where it came into the lake. And that's where it built this feature here, which is called a delta. And through time, it will have a pathway that will go on one side of the delta. And then maybe there's a flood and the river will switch position and move to the other side of the delta. And in that way, it's spreading out all of its sediments over long periods of time. And before we could land on Mars, we used to use this as a way of understanding the history of landforms, because we knew we were getting a slice of Mars through time. That if we moved either left to right or right to left or jumped about, we could see that this one is older than this because they're laid on top of each other. So as Kevin already pointed out, this is not real. This is not the color of Mars. This is a black and white image that we have special instruments that Europe has sent to Mars. It's known as the CRISM instrument, and it can collect data that's been given off from the surface of Mars, energy that's coming back from the surface of Mars in a whole range, different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. And it showed us here that we had clays. Now you go out your back garden or go into the field and you can see there's a load of muck and clay there. Well, that didn't just happen. You had water, and on Earth you certainly had organisms that broke down rocks to form those clays. But on Mars, we didn't have organisms that did that, but we certainly had heat, higher temperatures, and we had water, and they deposited clays. And so that was really why we went to Jezero, because we found that you had a fan deposit, but sometimes these fans form in deserts without water. So we weren't absolutely sure that it had formed underwater, but the presence of the clays said to us there was water, and it had to be around for a pretty long time for those clays to break down, because they don't break down in a minute. And so where there's water, maybe there's life. And so it's a really, we don't know what we're going to find there, but it's a really interesting opportunity to go and look perhaps for a signature of water on this planet. But Kevin mentioned a little bit, and I'm going to end on these 2 slides, about the 7 minutes of terror. And I agree, and it's very exciting, and it survived, but its challenges are not over. What you're looking at here is a satellite image in very high resolution, and this is kind of where it landed, and it threw out some sediment, and that's why it's got these dark rays. But these brighter features that are going up and down, kind of top to bottom,
Yeah.
These are what, well, I actually gave them these names. These are called TARs. They're called transverse aeolian ridges. They're basically wind-blown ridges of sand. The rover has to move up and down and across them, and that is not easy. We have evidence on Mars where rovers got stuck in sand.
Yeah.
And you had people on Earth trying to use the sister model of the rover to try and maneuver into sand to figure out how you'd get it out of that little sand dune, and they worked. They were able to do it, but the hazards are not over at all on Mars. And the other thing, of course, is that this is and this is my last image. This is an image of the surface of Mars taken by Perseverance, and as you look across the distance, you can certainly see some of the sandy material. This shouldn't be a problem for it, but these are those features, those linear. Can you see the bright linear features moving across? So they're quite low, so perhaps it'll be okay. But then you've got all of these rocks. And sometimes, in some places on Mars, the rocks are they're like knife edge sharp. And we know in the last Curiosity rover that they punctured, there was no air in the tires, but they punctured the aluminium in the wheels on that rover. They've designed it now a little bit better because of that, but there's all kinds of hazards on Mars. So the excitement of the story and will it work is not yet over for us for studying Mars. Thanks, everyone.
Mary, what are you most excited about for this mission?
Well, I'm dying to get up and have a look at the cliffs. The cliffs are kind of like a section through time. If you go to the cliffs of Moher, or you see any cliffs as you're driving down the road, it's time from the bottom generally to the top. And in that, you can see all sorts of information that we can interpret and figure out what was going on in this very dynamic delta as the river was moving and, switching its place across on the surface of Mars. So I'm very interested in that, but I'm very interested in sand dunes and to see what they're made of and how long they've been there and how they move across this particular part of Mars.
Oh, well, I hope we get good data from it. Kevin, before we go further into it, let's just go back to you. And so we know that we've Perseverance now, and there has been other rovers. Mary's mentioned there Curiosity and Opportunity and stuff. So in context of Perseverance, how does it fit in relation to the previous parts that have gone before? You mentioned them there: Sojourner, Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, and now Perseverance.
So do you want me to run through a few slides on that?
Yeah. If we've time, give us about 4 minutes of it, and then we'll
more slides than that. So
I know. I'm sorry.
I'll do it. So as I mentioned earlier, just see if can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just run this. So get it going. So we're part of a very long lineage of it. We were getting it wrong with Mars. In the 60s, we saw craters. NASA panicked, bailed out of Mars. James Webb, the James Webb Telescope, was the head of NASA, convinced Lyndon B. Johnson, don't panic, go back to Mars. They landed a rover, or they landed there, there's Carl Sagan beside a model of it, in 76 to search for life, and found that the soil was toxic to all life. So NASA well and truly just said, we're going away from Mars for a while. However, people like Mary worked relentlessly through the 80s and 90s and discovered that Mars seemed to be quite Earth-like in its very early history, and in all the ways that seemed important to the origin of life on Earth. So from 97 onwards, there's been a strategy by NASA and ESA to do this properly, to make no presumptions, explore the planet properly. So we had Sojourner in 97, this was a whistle-stop tour. Then nothing short of an armada of orbiters: Mars Global Surveyor, Mars Odyssey, Europe's Mars Express, and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and others. And as Mary said, showing sedimentation everywhere on Mars, telling us that it's been a very active planet, another river delta, ancient evidence of plate tectonic activity. As Mary said, this great planetary dichotomy: northern lowlands, southern highlands, southern lowlands. And then even evidence, obviously found suggestion of water within the top meter, 60 degrees north and south. So we sent the Phoenix lander there, and it scraped away the surface and found ice just under the surface. Europe's orbiter is finding underwater briny lakes below the actual Nord ice cap. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter actually showing evidence of other ancient seas and hydrothermal activity. And Mary, I must have got this wrong. You're saying this is a CRISM Mars Express image. I thought it was a Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter image, so my apologies on that. But these orbiters have just been building a case for why Mars is so interesting in the past. So then we sent Spirit and Opportunity in 23. Spirit landed in Gusev Crater, and through accident, by the way, got a stone stuck in its wheel, scraped the surface and uncovered salt materials underneath the soil. Opportunity similarly found precipitate materials, what's called hematite, suggesting it was an ancient sea. And just got to show this image. The last image from Opportunity in 2018 was, it was driving down this little valley called Perseverance Valley in a huge crater when a dust storm came, blew over its, as Mary talks about the hazards of the planet. Dust storms can be global and covered the planet's, or the space probe's solar panels, and we haven't heard from it since. Then Curiosity went in 2012 and has been analyzing another crater called Gale Crater, where we also thought it was a freshwater lake. And indeed, it has found that this entire area was a freshwater lake in its past. Mary talked about sedimentary layering. Look at that. So it's been Curiosity been driving through there for the last 8 years. Overwhelming evidence that it was a freshwater lake, neutral pH, low salinity. And that's why NASA declared that lake as habitable in the past, meaning life from Earth could have survived there had it been there in the past. And also suggestion that there are organic molecules in mudstones there as well. Now, whether they were synthesized on Mars or not, we don't know. But nevertheless, there were organic molecules in that lake 3-point-whatever number billion years ago. So all of this amazing evidence has been being accumulated over the last 24 years. And I suppose at every juncture, the questions are being asked by NASA and ESA: do we go on? Do we do the next mission?
Yeah.
And in my view, outside of CERN, there hasn't been a more successful science program in the last 25 years by humanity. Mars science, and let me put it this way, and then I'll shut up. Apart from trying to ask the question as to whether there's life on Mars, the way I like to view it is that we like to ask the question: what does Earth-like mean for the Earth when life was originating here? And indeed, Earth was cratered when life originated here. So when you look at the cratered southern highlands of Mars, don't think the moon, think ancient Earth, potentially. Mary might slap me down for being too ambitious or optimistic on that, I don't know. But all I'll say is, nevertheless, Mars has a lot to tell us about what we think early Earth might have been like. Because last thing I'll say is, Mars collapsed around 3.5 billion years ago, so it retains a record of its early history that Earth doesn't retain. And that's how we get the perseverance.
Thanks, Kevin. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. Okay, I'm going to kind of ask you a few questions probably for the next 5 minutes, and then we're going to go over to questions, because I can see we're already getting good questions. But I really want to know, I love people, right? So I'm always thinking about the people behind all of this, and I'm thinking about the engineers. And I'll go to you in a second, John. And Mary, I want to come to you as a scientist, and I want to ask you about what it feels like for somebody to be invested in like the rover, and having been part of like one of the science instruments on board, and it all going well, and you know the rover lands and you start getting data back, and you're the first person to see that data. What is that experience like from start to finish?
Who are you asking?
Mary, I'm asking
Sorry. Yes, ma'am, I'm here. So I have to say it is a bit of an adrenaline hit.
Yeah.
Being the first to see some of this data coming back. And then it kind of goes on the spectrum of, wow, oh my God, challenging. I've no idea what I'm looking at. And holy moly, I've got to come up with a really intelligent idea about what I'm seeing here. It's like a process that might happen sometimes over 24 hours and sometimes over 1 hour and sometimes over several weeks. But it is, it's a wonderful thing for many, many reasons. It's exciting, but it forces you to be collaborative. So I have a geography training, a physical geography training, and most of the people I worked with in the NASA community spoke to me in differential equations. And John, you'll totally get this, but and Kevin, and I'm a geographer, so I like to understand landforms and how they form and think about time and space, and not necessarily about how to model stuff. But my gosh, it really taught me, and this is so relevant for today and our climate crisis today, that we need to talk to people outside our own silos. And so that was definitely one of the benefits of working on Mars. It's an incredibly exciting career. It is very, very fulfilling because it's nothing but exciting, and you really feel like you're making a contribution. You're making a contribution to people, and to I suppose at the time of government, I was working obviously for the United States government. You're really making a contribution to moving forward science, and that you don't always feel that as a scientist. Sometimes you kind of like it's a bit of a drudge, but when I was working there, I definitely felt like what I did mattered to a lot of people in a very, very important ways, and allowed us to go on and move on to different missions and directions of missions. What were the questions? When I started working there, the question was, where's the water? And when I moved back to Ireland, they were moving on to, well, where is life? And now that's where we are now. We're looking for life.
Incredible. Yeah. So you can really understand what that moment is of when the rover landed for those engineers and scientists, I guess. And the hard work starts now, of course, because now you got to look at all the information that is coming in, I imagine.
Yes, well, it's this idea that they hand over to a new team.
Yeah.
So we have all the research scientists who will be doing the analysis on the data, with the engineers kind of processing some of that data. But these people some of them started 20 years ago, and some of them 10 years ago. I got my first call to take part in the Curiosity rover mission in 2000. I was just thinking about this, 2001. And that landed in 2012.
Wow.
So that's when I wasn't the first person. Do you know what I mean? Like there was there was years of people. I was just saying, come on in on this. We have the camera built already, so there would have been at least 10 years before that. Yeah, so these are lifelong projects.
Yeah, big massive timelines. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Mary. And John, for you, from the engineering point of view, being involved in the design process and all the coatings and everything. So, what was launch like for you? What was launch day for you? So that was February. That was last February. So I was at Darmstadt, and I was with one of your colleagues, Barry. No, I wouldn't say Barry. Is it? No, who? I can't. You're on mute. You come off mute for a second. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was. Excuse me.
Yeah. And but you were at NASA. So what was that day like for you? Because it was the culmination of at least 5 years of coating, from what you said, from 2012 to 2017, or probably more.
Well, from the time we heard that the European Space Agency were looking for something, it was 10 years. And to follow up what Mary said, the solar orbiter will not get to within the distance of the sun that it's aiming at for another year plus. So it's 2022 when it reaches its destination. So that's a long, long time. And then the difference, I suppose, with the type of mission that we were involved in is that every time it orbits and comes close to the sun, it's almost like a new event, because they're moving from the, that sort of ecliptical plane. They're moving up so that they can look at the poles of the sun over time. So it's almost like a new event, and I think there's going to be about 20 different flybys. So it's almost it's like a wedding anniversary. Like it comes around.
Gift that keeps on coming. Yeah.
Very good. It's really exciting. It was just surreal over there to watch that rocket take off after all of that time, and to be present. And also, if you just recall, that was one of the last opportunities to travel before COVID hit. Yeah. So had it not launched, it was already 3 or 4 years late. Had it not launched, then the chances of us getting over to see it were very, very slim, because COVID would have hit, and it would have launched without that same international audience in Florida. So we were blessed.
Amazing. It's amazing to be part of something so long-term, from the engineering and from the science point of view. Do people have questions? I'm looking at the time, and we're nearly up to we're just past 1:45. So, Owen, do you want to come in here with some questions? I've got tons, but let's find out other questions from people.
From Adam Brown asks, do you think there'll be different ores on Mars that will help us in the long term for space exploration?
Ores.
as in minerals.
Minerals. Okay. So Mary or
We're not thinking
Kevin?
of rowing.
Yeah,
Niamh.
that's what I thought. I thought it was like
Mars is very similar to many of the planetary bodies, including Earth, in terms of the types of rocks and types of minerals that are there, but there are differences in the abundance of them. So there's not so much quartz on Mars. There's loads of quartz here on Earth. Basically, when you go down to the beach, you pick up sand. What you're picking up is quartz, the mineral quartz. So from the mapping, the geological mapping investigations we've done, we can see things like olivine, which is rarely found here on Earth, because the minute you mix it with water, it basically degrades very, very quickly, whereas there's loads of it across the very dry, arid planet of Mars. And I'm not aware yet of a technical application for olivine. Maybe somebody here is in the engineering field. But asteroids are a little bit better targets for looking for rare elements that we need to power computers and mobile phones and technologies like that here on Earth. But in terms of, the question was kind of wrapped around this idea of something there to help us with future space exploration. Water. We need a place for people to land, to be safe, to use that as a base to explore further in our solar system. Now, Mars is probably a bit too far. I'd actually be sending people to comets and to try and look at some of the asteroids to see if they could mine some water products from there. So there, out in the solar system, yes, there are different minerals that are of great value to humans at the moment.
Thanks.
Hey, Sean Kelleher asks, recently a commercial organization claimed that it could extract significant amounts of oxygen from moon rock. Is that possible on Mars?
Yes.
Well, there's one of the experiments on board is going to extract, just convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, isn't it? One of the pieces of equipment that one of the experiments on board, right?
Yeah, on Perseverance, actually, you can check out an experiment called MOXIE, and it's going to synthesize oxygen, breathable oxygen from the carbon dioxide atmosphere. Mars' atmosphere is only 1% as dense as Earth, but there's enough still there to produce plenty of carbon dioxide. And basically, the statistic is for everything you bring to Mars, it costs between $100,000 and $200,000 per kilogram. So even if astronauts land there eventually, they'll have to manufacture 28 tons of methane from the atmosphere to fuel the rocket to get back up off the surface. So the whole question of it's called in situ research utilization is a massive engineering task. And again, just to connect the engineering to the science here, none of this will happen without a new world of engineering. We've got to invent the engineering world to explore Mars with humans. And at least half of that effort will be in how to use resources there, rather than bringing them at hundreds of thousands of dollars per kilogram.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Kevin. What else, Owen?
Well, I suppose I was waiting to ask this, but I suppose Jacob asks, are there aliens on Mars? But I suppose we could extend that into the chances of finding life on Mars as well.
Yeah. Mary, how hopeful are you with the experiments that they have on board of Perseverance that will be unequivocally kind of proven?
Never say never. There is life out there in the solar system. Yeah. I'm going to throw down my hat there now, and I'll bet you €1.
Fighting words
before I die. No, but basically, this mission really is looking for signatures of life, aren't they? They're going to look in really high resolution in at the rock sections. They're going to cut them and look at them like you would if you had the microscope here on Earth, and you're going to look and see if you have that signature. You know, that can be physical signature or chemical signature, and that's what they're going to look. So they're basically saying that they're going to produce more evidence that it is likely that there was in the past life on Mars. Now, we've already had a big debate about this because one of the rocks from Mars just made its own way here to Earth and landed as a meteorite and was rescued, I think, from the Antarctic, and was analysed. And there was a big, huge fuss around a team of researchers got up and said, here's a little worm looking like, it was like an earthworm. It had all these little segments in it, teeny tiny, like you wouldn't see it with the naked eye. And I remember sitting in conferences in the United States, and there was massive upset, can we put it politely, about people who passionately believe that this was evidence. Those people going like, that is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever heard in my life. That's this problem or that problem. So they may discover evidence. It may lend weight to the argument of whether or not there's life. And then there would be a huge, as science does, you've got a hypothesis and then you test it. Is it true? Can it survive this argument or that argument, and build and build and build? So let's just see. I'm excited for them. I really am excited for them to see what they might come up with.
How long do you think it will take for them to start sharing that data? Like,
NASA has a reputation of sharing things really, really quickly. I think when you're on a mission, you decide it yourself, but it generally is within 3 months of receiving the data. So if they get it in now. ESA is a little bit different. They do tend to hold on to stuff. And Kevin talked before about that discovery of saline or briny water underground, like a big, huge lake of. ESA held on to that for a very, very long time, not because they didn't want to tell anybody, more because they wanted to make sure that they were right. And they needed to collect more and more data to really prove it to themselves before they let it out. So I would expect once they take the samples, do the analysis, I expect the next big conference on Mars is this March, so the following 12 months. We'll might hear something.
Can I just add one thing, Niamh?
Yeah.
Don't judge the success on this mission on whether we find that answer or not. The point is that the whole reason why we've been so successful with Mars exploration since 1997 is we basically abandoned that question from Viking. We start to ask the question, what's the planet like in terms of its overall structure? What was the story of water there? What's the story of habitability, the capability for origins? Not necessarily. So we're answering questions already. We already know Mars was a watery world, is a watery world. Earth is no longer unique in that regard. We know Mars was habitable in the past. Earth is no longer unique in that regard. This has been hugely successful to date. And at a minimum, what we'll get is new insights into the kind of planetary context that gave rise to life on Earth, because we know it happened here. And if there were similarities with Mars on the macroscopic level, they don't stop there. We'll find similarities on the microscopic level. So I know that's a nuanced argument that a scientist will make, but too often we write missions off and don't find the little green man, So I just think the people don't judge the mission on that basis.
No, there's just going to be so much data. I mean, we're going to understand Mars a whole lot better. I think that's the whole point. Owen?
Joanne asks, I think it was mentioned earlier that the sand on Mars, so I think Kevin mentioned something about toxic sand on Mars, and she's asking, how is the sand on Mars toxic?
Well, Mary, I think it's more perchlorate, is it?
Yeah, actually, there's perchlorates everywhere, and they actually are carcinogenic. They give thyroid cancer, actually. Now, however, they're a super oxidizing agent as well, so the kind of stuff you use to clean your bathroom. So they basically break down organic molecules. They were at least in many sites. I don't know whether they're ubiquitous across the planet, but it's filled with quite nasty chemical. Now, that's the surface. That's just the top surface, okay?
Okay, so Martians, that's why Martians have blonde hair. Okay. There's a more technical one now from Jimmy Barry Murphy. Is there any reason that NASA use ULA over SpaceX rockets for missions further than low Earth orbit?
Well, I mean, the thing is, SpaceX are just a newer company. I mean, they're trailblazing in rocketry in terms of reusability and price. So, in fact, I think for the what they call the Europa Clipper mission, as Mary said, that'll be an exciting one. They're going to use a SpaceX Falcon Heavy. ULA are just around. They're just been doing it a long time. So SpaceX are joining the community increasingly, and there'll be no reason in the future why they won't be used. But I just think that they weren't around to get this thing off the ground in 3 or 4 years ago. It's just they're a new company,
Anything else there, Owen?
Yes, there was a question from Michael Grehan about how much per kilogram would an ore from an asteroid cost to bring back? And he's saying just ballpark to the nearest million.
He's obviously a business. He's obviously got his business.
He's obviously
hat on.
thinking of investing something here. I think.
Well, he obviously is. He's thinking way ahead.
He knows the answer, and it's not worth it right now. That's what he's saying.
Okay.
Just bringing the engineering,
off.
just bringing the engineering strand back in because it is Engineers Week. John, when you get involved in a mission like that, I mean, are you being asked to participate in more and more complicated kind of structures that form the kind of the background shape to kind of hold all these payloads and these experiments on board? And if so, like, how do you go about that and putting it all together?
Yeah, it is complicated. I suppose there's a sort of a structure, and like, you know, to back up what Kevin said, you know, like about heritage, there is a sort of a system there. Say, for example, in Europe, you've got three major companies. You've got Thales Alenia, Airbus, and more recently OHB in Germany. They're called the primes. They're the biggest space companies. They're the ones who get the missions. They tend to hand out a lot of projects then to the sub-primes. And the sub-primes tend to hand out the projects to smaller companies. And we find ourselves being constantly requested to do stuff by the smaller companies, the sub-primes and the primes, and then also the European Space Agency itself. So it really depends on the mission and the level of desperation. An awful lot of the time you find that companies are really searching for something new. And then when they find something new, they won't accept it because it's not qualified or there isn't enough experience on it. So you've got to try and fit in all of those different considerations when you're pitching for something. But the most important thing is to have the right people in your company and the right technologies at your disposal so that you can then meet the need. And sometimes you may have the technology, but you don't know how to assess it yourself. So if you don't know how to assess it, you're not fit to be on that mission because you can't tell whether you do or don't meet the grade. And there's a lot of serendipity and there's a lot of politics, particularly in Europe. You'll find, German companies will want to use German technologies, and British companies will want to use British technologies, and they will lobby the primes and the sub-primes, and they'll lobby the European Space Agency so that they can covet those particular missions and the technologies on those missions. So it's very political. It's very hit and miss, and there's a certain amount of gambling involved in it. So you have to sort of pick the projects that you really think that you can succeed with.
Gosh, yeah, that's quite a lot to kind of keep juggling in the air, all right? This is John. How are we doing on time, Owen? Are we okay for another few questions?
Yeah, well, let's.
Steve, could I just interrupt and just say, like, we heard Mary and John talk, just to all the young people here, just to emphasize, it's fantastic in Ireland that there are careers in this now. You can do complete pure Mars science, say working under Mary, or going and do a degree that she teaches in, or work with Irish engineering firms and space missions. That wasn't the case 20 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago. So I just think this is a lovely showcase event that for any of the young people, if you want to work in this as a scientist or an engineer, the opportunities are there in Ireland and in Europe and beyond. I just think it's important to emphasize that for all of the young people listening in.
Yeah, it is. It's a great time, Kevin, isn't it? I mean, there you go. There's just so many different experiments. And being a member state of the European Space Agency, you can get involved as an engineer or as a scientist or even as a space lawyer or all sorts of careers.
I think, Kevin, thank you very much. You used my wrap up call to action. No, I think we might just finish it there, try and stay on time, but before I thank our speakers again, I will reiterate that anyone, young people watching, or if there's any teachers and parents there, that people can grow up in Ireland and work on the space programs. John O Donoghue is actually his work is out there in space, physical coatings that were put on in the southeast of Ireland by engineers in the southeast of Ireland. So that's that's a living testimony. Mary Bourke has been working on projects and has been contributing to the science that's happening out there. So when we look up in the night sky and we see that little red dot up there, we know that there's Irish influences there. We know that on the going to the sun, there's John O'Donoghue's work, and we know that in the future there's lots more opportunities, and you know, people like Kevin Nolan and Niamh are doing fantastic work year in, year out, to inspire new generations. And this morning we had, for our first event for Engineers Week, we had a talk by a lady called Shanda McCluskey, who she was talking about her book T-Bone the Drone to about 1,000 primary school kids. And interesting, we had another engineer on telling us how she got into engineering, and she said Disney Channel inspired her. So we're hoping that children's book writers will inspire kids, and it's really important because of the a lot of lack of positive let's say we have serious problems with gender stereotyping of roles, and the earlier and the more influences we can get to get young people to be to explore, to not to see any boundaries, real or imagined, and to be and to be creative, and to understand that creativity is core to science and engineering. That's really important. And I want to just share my screen here. Let me see. Can I share? And are we seeing this?
Yep.
Okay. So we've come from the scientists, but one thing Kevin, John, and Mary have shown that young Irish people can grow up and become involved in science and engineering in space. And Niamh has shown us that an Irish person could grow up and go into space. So that's a very real possibility for any young people watching, or teachers or parents should know that. And Niamh, we do hope that she gets there. But she has shared her dream, and it's so inspiring, and we would really urge people to go and buy Niamh's book, Dream Big, and to get that message that, you know, dream and follow your dreams, and you know, seek out those opportunities that are there. And so I would like to thank everyone once again, to Kevin, John, and Mary, to Niamh for her wonderful moderating, and to all you for coming and sharing this with us. And as I say, at least we could be together online. Hopefully in not too distant future, we'll be meeting again, and we'll be able to have those important little chats on the way out of meetings, and things will be back to normal. So everyone, it's spring. There's the sun is out, birds are singing, there's hope, and things are getting better, and we'll soon be out of this. And we hope you all stay safe, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Owen.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Kevin. Thanks, Owen.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers now.
Take care. All the
Thanks,
best.
all. Take good care.
Bye. Watching Rose.
See everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
That's brilliant.